Hello again, Super Studs, and welcome to Meant to Achieve, the place where athletes come to think straight and get focused so they can achieve their goals. I'm Griff Joyce, and I tend to be the guy in front of the camera, and this is number 7 in the series of What Makes Them So Great. Today we're talking about the speed of implementation. Now that is an awful big fancy word up there. Let's talk about what implementation means. It is in fact just a big fancy word for how fast do you use stuff. So if I was going to implement a new procedure at school, I wanted to make sure that homeroom was 7 minutes instead of 10, we would start that on Monday. We would implement it on Monday. We'd have a 7-minute homeroom instead of a 10. So implementation is using a new anything. So the speed of implementation is the speed at which you change and use new strategies or techniques or skills. So this is an incredibly important concept. Please stay with me on this one, and you can find ways to get ahead very, well, literally quickly. Okay, implementation, how fast you start to learn stuff. So what are the 3 things that we need to do to have gone over covering a skill to the point where we use it? Okay, we have to learn the new skill, strategy, or technique. We have to transfer it into games. So in other words, we learn things usually in practice. We then have to transfer that learning into actual game usage. And then we have to get good enough at it in actual competition that it works. So learn it, transfer it into your actual game during competitions, and be good enough at it so that it works. Those are the 3 things that you need to do for implementation, the big fancy word, to have occurred. The distance, the length of time that it takes to do that is the speed at which you implement things. So let's make this clear. You are in a race with other athletes on other teams in other areas to learn quicker than them. Because if you don't learn quicker than them, they'll learn more than you in any given length of time. In a practice, if you stack those on top of each other in a week, and stack those weeks on top of each other in a month, and by the end of a season, when championships happen, who's got the better chance of winning that championship? Probably the team that's learned and changed and implemented the most new, logical, useful things into their game. So this is, if you're not starting to understand why this is so important, I hope you start to now. So let's figure this out. How fast do you, number 1, learn? Remember, it's learn, put it in your game, make it effective. How fast do you learn? Well, I've got a story of a fairly typical athlete. Now, I'm sorry to call you out on this, but a lot of athletes have no intention of changing much of anything they do. They think they go to practice to change, and they're willing to make incredibly slow change, but making instantaneous change I've found is very possible with many new skills in many sports. And some athletes, just the problem is they don't plan on learning it. So there was a sport that I was observing one time with an expert was teaching a lucky panel of kids that got selected to learn from this guru, let's call him. And there was a skill where you were supposed to jump off of 1 foot, and this kid was only used to jumping off of 2. So the problem was this kid was really athletic. And so their jumping off of 2 feet version was better than the other kids jumping off of 1. So this kid would not jump off of 1 foot, would not jump off of 1 foot, would not jump off of 1 foot. The guru guy, the guy in charge, stops the thing and he goes, "Hey, kiddo, don't know if you heard me the first 20 times. I told you to jump off 1 foot. I didn't ask you, didn't request it, didn't give it as a suggestion. You're gonna jump off 1 foot right now." They did it again. The athlete jumped off of 2 feet. I could not fathom that the kid had ignored this guy that was really, really good at what he was doing. And she was selected to learn from him where other athletes were passed over. The guy stopped calmly. He stopped the clinic and he said, "Hey," I forget what her name was, "Sally, here's the deal. I don't know if you know who I am, but I know everybody that coaches in the Division I ranks. All the coaches on the West Coast, where you currently live, and I understand want to play, are my personal friends that I go hang out with at big tournaments. I consult, they coach, they ask me they consult with me on my opinion on who should play for them, I will make sure you are not that kid. The whole clinic went dead silent. I mean, nobody moved, breathed, talked, anything. And we all looked at Sally. He says, now, you're going to jump off 1 foot. He does the drill one more time. Sure enough, she jumps off 1 foot and absolutely destroys the skill. It was amazing how much better she was after having never practiced it, just doing it differently. Now again, she was so darn good before, she was like, why would I bother to change? I already got this nailed. But it took threats on her future to get her to change. So this is one of the problems. Athletes just don't plan on changing sometimes. And so their speed of implementation doesn't exist. They don't change and implement. So please make sure that you're working hard on changing and make that learning curve very quick as you can. So let's assume you've learned something. How long does it take to transfer things into your game? Okay, transfer them into your game. You have to create space in your brain and in the time that you have to plan to get these things in there. So in other words, you learn something new and you become good at it in practice, it is necessarily harder in the games. There are people in your way working against you. There's a lot of pressure. There's time on the clock. You need to create time, okay, to plan to do this new thing because it's new for you, and you need to create space in your brain. We only have so much brain power, and we tend to be using most of it to beat our opponents. If you keep using that same amount of brain power to beat the opponents and don't leave any for the new plan, the new skill, the new technique, you will forget to use it or use it very poorly. And that's the third step, is not just using it in the games, but using it effectively. You have to be consistent. Remember, the essence of being pretty good in high school sports is just never really being bad. In college, you should probably be a little better than that, but really, if you're just never bad, you're pretty good in high school sports. So how do we get to the point where you are effective? Well, you got to create that time to plan. You got to create that space in your brain to make sure it gets into your game, and then you have to make sure you use it enough times that you can figure it out through experimentation. Remember, life, especially sport, is just one great big experiment. Keep experimenting until you've figured it out. Now, when all that learning, transferring, and then becoming effective has occurred, there's a time that took. That is your speed of implementation on this particular skill. And remember, we're in a race with other athletes. So let's say Team A, your team, takes this long to learn a new skill. Let's say Team B, maybe your rivals, maybe somebody you don't even know about, but you're about to play in the state championship in 2 months, you're just not aware of it yet. They only take this long to learn. Again, you stack those on top of each other. In a season's worth of time, you've been able to learn, I don't know, 8 new concepts. They got to learn 12. Oh, and by the way, they might have done this last year. So in the span of 2 years, they got to learn 24 things where you only got to learn 16. What if you're in varsity 3 years? They have learned 36 things where you guys were only able to learn 24. Who do you think has a vast, huge advantage over you in the state championship? The other guys. So make sure that when you're learning stuff, there's a lot of pressure on you to learn it quickly. Put it in your game and become good at it. Because if you don't, other teams are. And when you find them in the championship that you want to deny them of, if they know more than you and they've become better at it than you, the chances get better for them and worse for you. And I want desperately for you to be succeeding and achieving all the time. So I hope this helps. Speed of implementation. If you like this presentation, make sure you check out our other videos by subscribing to our page, our channel here on YouTube, and make sure you drop by our Meant to Achieve page on Facebook. The word Ment, M-E-N-T, the number 2, and the word achieve. Like us, share the word, and make sure other kids have the opportunity to learn these same things. And until next time, make sure you keep thinking straight and stay focused, because you are meant to achieve.